Go east. It's like discovering Europe all over again.
Welcome to the presentation on our tours in Eastern Europe. That's our tour of the best of Eastern Europe, our tour of the best of the Adriatic, and our Prague and Budapest tours. We've got some guides joining us. I'll be introducing them in a moment. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Cameron Hewitt, and like a lot of us here at Rick Steves, I wear a lot of different hats. I work in the office. I'm a guidebook editor, researcher, and writer. I'm also the co-author of the Eastern Europe guidebook, as well as the Croatia, Slovenia, and Budapest guidebooks. Co-author, what does that mean? It basically means I wrote those whole books, and then we put Rick's name on it, so we sell a few more copies. And then Rick gets to go and travel on my work every so often and put his own touches on it and make it his. So we have a great collaboration on that book. I've also worked extensively as a tour guide, specifically on these tours, the Best of Eastern Europe and the Best of the Adriatic tour. In fact, along with Tina and a couple other folks, I was one of the folks who first masterminded the Adriatic tour a few years back. And it's turned out to be very successful, so we're really happy with that tour as well. A few housekeeping notes. There's two audiences to this event. Some of you are here in this room, and for those of you, welcome very heartily. And there's also an audience watching online streaming. So for the folks who are watching remotely who couldn't make it to this event, we're glad that you were able to tune in as well. If you are here in person at the event, you probably already have this yellow sheet, which explains that we have 20 different classes going on all day long with people like me and people like these folks. So there's your information on that. And I think with that, I've got a few more announcements. I think with that, we'll just get started. I'll cover the announcements once we get going. We've got a lot of ground to cover here. We've got classes covering tours covering 8 different countries, and I've got about an hour to cover them all. So I'd better get going and make sure we can fit them all in. So we're going to go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about what we call Eastern Europe. And this is a term that has different definitions depending on who you talk to. For most Americans, when you think of Eastern Europe, you imagine this, kind of the stern, intimidating, frightening specter of communism. Well, I'm here to tell you that that's a very dated idea of Eastern Europe. Things have changed dramatically. Communism is ancient history, and these days the communist history of Eastern Europe is something to kind of have fun with and play around with, not something to be frightened by, be intimidated by. It's one chapter in a very long, illustrious, interesting history, and our tour guides are going to make sure you understand all of the different facets of that history. Your ideas of Eastern Europe, again, maybe they're a little bit dated, maybe they come from communist period. You think of kind of rusting factories and the kind of Soviet heavy industry. Well, the reality in a lot of Eastern Europe is closer to this. Beautiful pastoral countryside. It's a really beautiful, friendly, engaging, interesting place to visit. We're going to be covering a lot of the great cities of Eastern Europe, illustrious cities and towns like the great cities of Prague, Krakow in Poland, Budapest with its wonderful thermal baths, Rovinj, a beautiful town on the Croatian Adriatic, throwing in a little bit of southerly spice to our Eastern European blend. Dubrovnik, one of the greatest medieval wall towns in Europe. And these tours also give us an opportunity to delve into some more exotic things. For example, Bosnia. Our Adriatic tour makes a point to spend a night and dip into Bosnia-Herzegovina so you can get a taste of a culture that's geographically very, very close to the rest of Eastern Europe, but culturally and historically very far away. You've got beautiful, tranquil hill towns in Eastern Europe. Again, these are probably surprises for some of you if you have outdated ideas of what Eastern Europe looks like. This looks maybe more like Italy, but no, this is a town we stay in overnight on our Adriatic tour. And one thing I think that's a hallmark of this region, especially in the south, on the Adriatic tour in Croatia and Slovenia, is the natural beauty. It's just an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous part of Europe. I think sort of mile for mile, it maybe is one of the most beautiful parts of the entire continent. Waterfalls down in Croatia. This is Plitvice Lakes, which is on 2 of our different itineraries in this region. Beautiful alpine lakes with crystal clear waters in Slovenia. Cut glass peaks. You can get high, high up into the mountains in this region. And again, we always try to find a beautiful, tranquil, fun town that you can call home and come home to at the end of the day. You folks already know a lot of the great things about Rick Steves' tour. I don't have to review all of these items, but I will be, through the course of the talk, I'll be reviewing some of the wonderful features of Rick Steves' tours. I'll be hitting some of those high points later. One thing that, as a tour guide, I really appreciate about Rick Steves' tours is they're really focused on getting you in touch with the people that you've traveled so far to meet. We're not trying to give you a sanitized, packaged experience. We want to connect you with the people who live every day in this area. If you're a Rick Steves fan, you probably know the expression temporary Europeans. We want our tour members to become temporary Europeans. And maybe that means learning how to dance the traditional Hungarian családás dance with the vintner's wife in the Hungarian wine region near Eger. Maybe it's meeting a young guy who's wearing a sport tracksuit, and over that he's got his traditional vest from his region. People wear the modern and the traditional with pride here. Or maybe you're actually going to travel all that way and find a distant relative. A lot of folks who are traveling in Eastern Europe are interested in tracking down their roots and getting to know maybe a little bit the country that their forefathers came from. Eastern Europe is kind of a strange, it's hard to define. The people who live in the countries I'm talking about would actually say this is not Eastern Europe. They would say it's Central Europe. And when you look at the map of Europe and you realize that Europe technically extends all the way to the Ural Mountains in Russia, all the way in the eastern edge of this frame, Central Europe is a much better term. But we know that North Americans, when they think of this part of Europe, they think of Eastern Europe, pretty much anything east of the Iron Curtain. So that's what we're focusing on here today. Just be aware when you travel there. If you talk to our guides and you say, I'm going to Eastern Europe, they might say, well, then why are you here in Slovenia? This is not Eastern Europe, it's Central Europe. And again, as Rick Steves tour guides, part of our job is helping you understand some of these little cultural tidbits. We've actually got 3 itineraries in Eastern Europe that we're going to be covering on this talk. Sort of our grand tour survey first-timer swing through is our best of Eastern Europe in 16 days, which touches on 6 different countries. If you want to delve into 2 of the best cities of Eastern Europe, we've got a 2-week, actually an 8-day tour going to Prague and Budapest. And then there's a 14-day Croatia and Slovenia tour, and the emphasis there is slowing down, taking a little more time in this area that has abundant natural wonders. And we'll talk more about each of these itineraries day by day throughout the course of this talk. A few of those reasons why I love Rick Steves tours. One thing is we've got these wonderful small groups, usually in the mid-20s, 24, 26, about 25 people, we kind of average it out. And it's a really fun thing as a tour guide to be able to travel with a smaller group, not a big 50-seat tour bus that's full with every seat. But 25 people can fit into a nice, cute little neighborhood restaurant, for example, instead of having to go to a big, fancy place that's designed for big tour groups. I also really appreciate, yes? I'll let the stage managers decide whether they can dim the lights, whether to make sure we can see the slides. Sorry, folks, if it's too bright. One thing I really appreciate as a Rick Steves tour guide, I have to tell you, one of my favorite policies on Rick Steves tours, we have a very strict no grumps policy. And that means you're going to be traveling not just with any 24, 25 people, but with 25 or 24 really interesting, engaged, inquisitive, fun people to travel with. And as a tour guide, I really, really enjoy meeting all the people who show up on these tours. By the way, these Eastern Europe tours, as a tour guide, I find we get a lot of folks who've traveled in other parts of Europe independently. They've gone on their own to Germany or to Spain or to France. And they show up the first night of the tour and they say, you know, I just want a little bit more help for this part of the region, this part of Europe, for this region. It just feels a little bit more intimidating. They know that there's language barrier. They know that there's border issues. Once they're on the tour, they find out that it's actually a very easy and accessible place to travel. Actually, I find there's a smaller language barrier in Eastern Europe than there is in a lot of Western Europe, especially big countries like Italy or Spain. And the borders, for most borders, are a thing of the past. They're all part of the European Union. Most of them are part of the Schengen Open Borders Agreement. So you can zip right from the Czech Republic to Poland without stopping, just like you can zip between France and Italy. But in any event, I do really appreciate getting folks on our tour who've had some travel experience because they are pretty worldly and they know what is going on in the world and they just want to kind of put this part of Europe on their mental maps. It's kind of an enigma to a lot of us. Obviously, we're going to make sure that we immerse you in the great sights of Eastern Europe, but we also are focused on the experiences. Again, in Hungary, in the rural part of Hungary around Eger, we want to take you and actually introduce you to some school kids. If the schedule allows, if it's not a school holiday or a weekend, we'll try to get you into a school cafeteria so you can actually talk to students and see how people in a small village in Hungary actually live. Given that the event that we're at right now is called Test Drive a Tour Guide, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I think one of the strengths of Rick Steves Tours is the wonderful crew of tour guides that we've assembled. My wife and I just last night hosted a dinner for 25 Eastern European tour guides and drivers at our house, and we had a wonderful time. These are absolutely fantastic people. They're incredibly knowledgeable. They'll teach you all about Eastern Europe, but they're just totally pleasant to be around as well. You've got Peter from Budapest. He'd love to tell you about Hungarian history. You've got Marian Kriškovič, and he knows that there's this old watchtower in the old town of Korčula, and if you climb up a ladder and go through the hole, you can sit out and have a cocktail overlooking the old town of Korčula from the top of this tower. Etelka from Hungary would love to tell you about the wines that are grown in her backyard and about the traditional Hungarian dress that she made herself. Tina would love to take you out on a springy suspension bridge in the Julian Alps. And I'm talking a lot about Europeans. We've actually got I've got to speak up for the Americans. We've got some really outstanding American tour guides also who love Europe so much they might as well live there. Ben Curtis, I'm showing you here, is a professor at Seattle University, a professor of modern European history, and does a fantastic job leading our Eastern Europe tours as well. We have two of our guides with us on the stage with me today. A little bit later, we'll hear from them, but I just want to tell you who they are so you're not wondering who are these two folks. Tina, whose picture you just saw on that bridge with Rick. Tina Heedy's from Slovenia. And George is from Budapest. So we'll hear from them as we get to their countries, as we outline the itineraries. But we're really very fortunate to have not just these two. Like I said, there's 20 Eastern European drivers and guides running around Edmonds today. By the way, after this talk, if you're here in person, all of us are going to head over to we call it the Tour Cantina. It's at the main conference center in the downstairs. It's a great place to get to know our guides, ask me or them any questions you have. We'll have a little bit of wine, a little bit of snacks, and it's also a place, if you want to book a tour today, that's the place to do it. Speaking of those tours, make sure you pick up one of our Rick Steves 2014 tour catalogs. They're available all over the place. If you're in this room, they're out in the lobby. If you're not in this room and watching remotely, you can click on over to the tour section of our website. And if you do have that on your lap, you can follow along. In just a moment, I'm going to be narrating the actual itineraries of these tours. And if you'd like to follow along day by day, you can use this brochure for that. Speaking of those who are watching remotely, not only do we have information on our tours, we have all sorts of other information on our website, so be sure to click around and see all the things that we have to offer. Whether you're here in this room or whether you're somewhere else, our website's always the first place to check. And of course, as you travel, equip yourself with good information. Here are a few of my babies here, the Croatia book, Budapest book, Eastern Europe book. These books and all of our other bags and accessories are 20% off today. If you're going on a tour, we'll give you for free the book that applies to that tour, so you don't have to necessarily rush out and buy it. But if you're just curious to do a little bit more reading or get a book that supplements what's on the tour, or you're going to do some travel before or after the tour, today's a good day to do it. 20% off in our store, which is kitty corner from that conference center. When you leave this theater here, you just go downhill and walk 2 blocks, and you'll run right into the whole thing. And again, if you're watching online, the 20% also applies to you, and the promo code for that 20% discount is on the page that you're looking at right now. Another special we have today, obviously, this is the time of year to be planning trips, to be booking tours. If you book your tour this weekend, basically, all the way through Monday, I believe, we'll give you $100 off per seat. Not only here in person, but again, if you're home online, look for the promo code on this page. You can book a tour either online or at our Tour Cantina and get that discount. We're going to start with our first of these 3 itineraries. This is the Best of Eastern Europe in 16-day tour. I've guided all of these tours, but I really particularly like this itinerary because it gives you a great once-over lightly, just a little taste of 3 or 4 days in each country. And after this tour, you really feel like you have just the start of a good sense of the Czech Republic and Poland and Hungary. It might help you decide where you might want to circle back to later. This is the Grand Tour. This is the Survey Tour. This is the starter if you want to kind of get a survey of what's available in Eastern Europe. It's a great tour. We've been doing this for... Our first one was in 2001. I was actually the assistant guide on our first ever Eastern Europe tour in 2001. And here's the quick rundown, and then we'll go day by day and show you some pictures of it. You start with a couple of days in Prague. You head over to the rural eastern part of Czech Republic, a region called Moravia. Head up into Poland, the best town in Poland, Kraków, for 3 nights. We kind of skip through Slovakia. That's sort of the 6th country. We don't stop there for an overnight, but we do have lunch there, and you get to see it. Then we have 4 nights altogether in Hungary, 1 night in a small town of Eger, 3 nights in the big city of Budapest. Continuing on down, we go to Plitvice Lakes National Park for 1 night, over to our own Adriatic escape on the beach of Rob Island for 2 nights, and we finish up in Tina's hometown, Lake Bled, high in the Julian Alps of Slovenia. That's a lot of information, so let's slow it down and go day by day through what you will see if you join us on our Best of Eastern Europe tour. We start out in the place where a lot of Americans first go to Eastern Europe, and that's Prague. There's a good reason why people start in Prague. It's the most accessible, it's the most romantic, it's arguably the most beautiful town of any of the places you could go in Eastern Europe. So it's a great kind of springboard, a great first step for exploring this part of Europe. Prague is actually divided into 4 historic towns, which merged together into one big city a couple of centuries ago. So we'll take a quick spin through all of the different towns, starting with the new town, the newest part of town. This is Wenceslas Square. This is the stage upon which most of Czech history has played out. Most of the big events in Czech history have happened right here. It's named for the good King Wenceslas of Christmas Carol fame. He was actually a 10th century Czech duke who first united the Czech people, but he's still very much a national hero. What's interesting about this new town area is you actually see more locals than tourists, and Prague is a very touristy town, so that's kind of fun. One thing I'll say about Eastern Europe in general, by way of this example in Prague, for me as a traveler and a tour guide and a historian, one of my favorite things about Eastern Europe is the history and the current events are divided only by a very fine line. A lot of things that you see in the news will end up in the history books 5 years later. And I think unlike anywhere else in Europe, you get these stories where people who actually experienced and witnessed them can tell you in their own words what it was like to see history unfold in their hometown. Let me give you an example. We're in Prague's new town. We're walking down at the bottom of town. We're walking through this sort of shopping arcade, nondescript. If you didn't have a great tour guide like Honza, who writes our Prague book and leads our tours in Eastern Europe, you might walk right past this plaque and not think twice about it. But Honza says, now hold on a second, let me tell you more about this. This honors the date of November 17th, 1989. Now, what was going on in the fall of 1989? Well, geez, the Berlin Wall fell just a few weeks before this date. What was going on in the Czech Republic? It just so happened that was the day of the national Czech national poet. So it's kind of the youth day. So even as part of a communist regime that was celebrated as an important holiday, all of the young people, all of the students of Prague gathered for their usual celebrations. At the end of the celebrations, they all kind of looked at each other and they had all this pent-up energy and all this frustration about this system that wasn't working, the system that was failing them. And they said, we need to do something about this. So all these students started marching across town, all the way across town towards Wenceslas Square, the square I just showed you, because they know that's the place where things happen in Prague. They were just a few steps away from Wenceslas Square in this shopping arcade when suddenly they realized they were surrounded by the riot police. The communist riot squad had surrounded them completely. They'd closed off both ends of the shopping arcade. And all of these students realized there's no way we're going to get out of this without taking a beating. The students held up their open hands and they flashed peace signs to make the point, we're unarmed. You don't have to hurt us. We're not causing trouble. It didn't matter. The only way to get out was to run along a line of riot police with clubs who were beating them and hitting them as they ran past. All of these students went home with their tails between their legs, battered and bruised. Their parents were furious. The next day, their parents and university professors and local theater performers decided we're going to start something serious. And several thousand people showed up on Wenceslas Square. The next day, the crowd doubled. The next day, the crowd doubled, and before you know it, hundreds of thousands of people were standing on Wenceslas Squares. They were jangling their keys to make a loud noise and shouting at the Parliament building, it's time for you to go. And after 10 days, the Czech Parliament basically voted itself out of existence. They said, we are no longer a communist country. They call it the Velvet Revolution, because not a shot was fired. And the Czechs woke up with their freedom. Wow, that is a powerful story. Imagine how much more powerful it is when told by Hansa Vihan, who as a 12-year-old kid was hanging out with his sister when they decided to walk down to Wenceslas Square that night. When you go on a tour and have a great tour guide like Hansa, you hear about history from the person who not just witnessed it or experienced it, but made it happen. That's what Eastern Europe is all about for me. Let's get back to some sightseeing. We've seen the new town, the old town of Prague. Beautiful Old Town Square of Prague. As a tour guide, it's ringed by architecture from every era. It's like a textbook of archaeology, of architecture as you walk through the streets of Prague. And one of my favorite things on my tours, the first night when I know people haven't been here yet, I like to walk them through the Old Town Square without saying anything on the way to dinner and pause for a moment and let people look around and take it all in. Invariably, someone comes up to me and nudges me excitedly, and they say, this is better than Disneyland. And they're right, it really is better than Disneyland because it's real. This is one of the biggest cities in Europe that wasn't damaged, in Eastern Europe, that wasn't damaged or destroyed in World War II. So you do have very well-preserved buildings, and it's just wonderful romance that Prague is so famous for. We'll make sure you see all the big landmarks, the big sites. This is the famous astronomical clock. And every hour, at the top of the hour, there's a little show. The little doors open at the top, and the 12 apostles shuffle past, and the devil turns over his hourglass. And it's really fun to watch the show. I prefer to turn around and watch the hordes of people who show up, mouths agape, to watch this little show. Prague is crowded. It's very touristy. There's a reason why it's on actually three different Rick Steves tours. Everyone loves Prague. One of our jobs as a tour guide is to help you avoid mobs like this. I'll give you an example later. But our job is to help you enjoy Prague without getting completely bogged down in these crowds. Wonderful history in Prague. There's a fantastic Jewish quarter, very well preserved. One of the best places in Europe to learn in a very accessible way about Jewish history. Fantastic architecture, as I said. The city is called the Golden City of 100 Spires. Tour members ask me, what should I do in my free time here in Prague? And I say, you could go to this museum or that museum, but I would just go wandering to any old neighborhood in Prague and you'll stumble upon beautiful buildings, sometimes still covered with soot and caked with dirt, but now more and more cleaned up. It's just a gorgeous place. Even if you don't know the first thing about architecture, this is a wonderful city to kind of get a taste of all the different styles from this part of the world. Art Nouveau, for example, was really big in Prague. After hours, you're going to have some free time on tour. There's plenty of options. There's a great little cocktail bar here where you're looking out over that old town square. Just absolutely magical. It's also a very musical city, so you'll see street performers out. You can stop and enjoy a few songs. If you want to do something a little bit more serious, there's several outstanding concert venues in Prague. For example, you could see Don Giovanni in the building where it was first premiered, written by Mozart. It's just got this great heritage here in Prague. You could look for one of these chain-smoking Mozarts out on the street who come up to you and try to offer you a concert ticket. The problem is they'll only tell you what they're selling. There's a ticket office that your tour guide can tell you about that's just 2 steps off the main square where you can see what all of your choices are for your free time. And we'll kind of help you figure out if you want classical, if you want modern, whatever it is. We'll make sure you get a good option in a good venue. We're going to cross the bridge, cross the river. And to do that, we'll go over the famous Charles Bridge. For my money, this is one of the most wonderful public spaces in all of Europe, one of the most delightful strolls. It's this beautiful bridge that connects the two halves of Prague, and it's jammed all hours of the day and night with artists and street performers and tourists and occasionally a few local Czechs as well. It's lined with Czech saints in stone, so it's got each of these saints has a different story that you can learn about. Crossing the river, you end up in the two other towns of Prague. You've got the castle town up on the hill and what's called Malá Strana, which means lower town or lesser town, which is below the castle. And as you walk across the bridge, again, if you have a good tour guide or use a good guidebook, we'll make sure that you find these hidden pockets of history. Crossing Charles Bridge, you look down and you see Kampa Island, this tranquil little island at the far end of Charles Bridge. And there's this wall that's tucked just off of Kampa Island that's slathered with all kinds of graffiti. And you might walk by and think, that's terrible, such an eyesore. If you have a great tour guide like Katerina here, she will explain to you, well, it's not just any graffiti. We call this the Lenin Wall. It's from communist times. And that's John Lennon, not Vladimir Lenin. Basically what happened was there was this nondescript wall, and every night the teenagers, during communist times, the teenagers of Prague would go out and paint murals of John Lennon. Because, of course, John Lennon and the Beatles represented peace. They represented Western values. It was one of those things that was semi-forbidden in the East. So it was really a symbol of rebellion to celebrate the Beatles. So every night they would paint these murals. The next day the police would come and they would paint over those murals. And the next night the kids would come back and paint the murals all over again. I mean, there must be hundreds of layers of paint on this wall. And now, of course, even though the Czechs are long since free, they still paint these John Lennon murals on this wall. It's a great little piece of current history, recent history. Again, it's where it blurs the line between current events and history. And you wouldn't know about that if you didn't have a good tour guide to explain it to you. Up at Prague Castle, we're going to do a little sightseeing. By most measures, this is the largest castle on Earth. It's just a gigantic, sprawling complex on top of a hill. We know you don't have time to see it all, so we're going to be very targeted, like with everything we do. We're going to make sure you see only the best of this area and just the highlights. The other thing to know about the castle, like Old Town Square, it can be completely jammed if you go at the wrong time of day. So the day that you're in Prague with your tour guide, and they say, tomorrow we're going to wake up early. Let's get up at 8:15 to go to Prague Castle. I'm telling you right now, don't say, 8:15, we want to sleep in. Your guide knows that if you wait until 8:30 or 8:45, you're going to wind up trying to get into the cathedral behind a huge pack of multilingual tour groups. We've learned from experience that if you go at the right time and you're the first group in that door, you've got this majestic cathedral to yourself for a few minutes. And then as you leave, you get to watch all of these other groups whose guides let them sleep in, filing in behind you. So again, we've got your back. We're going to try to maximize your time in this very popular and crowded city. We'll show you some parts of the royal palace, This is the cathedral I mentioned, St. Vitus. It's kind of the Westminster Abbey of Poland. It's the most important church of, sorry, not of Poland, of Czech Republic. It's got all of the Czech kings and so forth are buried here. Also here in this church, you're going to find a beautiful stained glass window by Alfons Mucha. As a tour guide, I love introducing my tour members to artists who are completely unknown outside of their native land and certainly aren't very known in the West, but not for lack of talent. Alfons Mucha lived in the early 20th century. He was a prodigiously talented Art Nouveau artist. He was very much the pride of the Czech Republic. But beyond that, anybody who knows the art or doesn't know art can see that he was immensely talented. He started out making like theater posters and eventually gained so much fame that he even designed the new currency for the Czech Republic when they first got their independence after the end of World War I. And there's really exciting news. Again, your tour guide will make sure you're up on everything that's going on in Prague. Alfons Mucha's masterwork is a series of a couple of dozen gigantic canvases called the Slavic Epic. Each one of these is larger than this screen here, and they tell the story of the entire history of the Slavic people. This has been out in this remote castle 3 hours from Prague for most of its history. Just a couple of years ago, they moved it into a museum that's right near downtown Prague. So your guide will make sure that you have all the details to absolutely be able to go and appreciate the masterpiece, the finest work of one of the most talented artists that you've never heard of before. Let's talk a little bit about food. Of course, on Rick Steves tours, half of your dinners are included, and we try to throw in a few lunches where it's convenient as well. Talk a little bit more broadly about Eastern European food. You know, Eastern European food has a reputation for being really heavy, lots of pork, potatoes, kraut, all of which is completely true. But there's also a little bit more variety than it gets credit for. So as you travel from country to country, not just in the food and everything, I think you'll be amazed how different these places are. You think Czech food, Polish food, it's all the same, Hungarian food, they're all part of the former Soviet bloc. No, not at all. In fact, each cuisine has its own interesting flair. Hungary has some delicious, very flavorful dishes. This is spätzle with some veal paprikash. They use a lot of spice in Hungary. Down in Croatia, you get stuff that looks like something from a gourmet restaurant in Italy. This is an octopus salad that I really enjoyed down on the Croatian coast. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the nice thing about having smaller groups is we can fit into small, friendly, local-style restaurants. One of my favorite restaurants in Croatia is this place. It's buried in a hill town in the middle of nowhere. We're lucky that we know about it, but we take our groups there, and there's no way we could squeeze 50 people in here, but they can squeeze in 25. Alma literally grills the bread, toasts the bread right on the hot coals and puts it in a basket and brings it right to your table. These are the kinds of dining experiences that can elevate even Eastern European cuisine to high cuisine that are part of your tour. Of course, a big part of traveling is also sampling the local drinks, so we try to do our best to do that as well. In Prague, for example, Czech Republic, it's known for having some of the best beer in Europe. It's probably some of the best, and it's certainly some of the cheapest. So we'll make sure to orient you and make sure you know what your options are if you want to go on a pub crawl at some point and sample some different beers. Continuing on our itinerary, Poland is a huge country, 40 million people. It's about the size of Spain. We could do a whole 2-week tour of just Poland. On this tour, because it's a quick survey, we're going to focus on the very best, and that's the city of Krakow, the historic capital of Poland before it moved north to Warsaw. It's the main university town of Poland. It's really still the cultural capital, even though it's not the political capital. Krakow has an absolutely delightful main market square, one of the most beautiful squares anywhere in Europe. And my favorite activity in Krakow is just sit out on the square and do some people watching. People flocking to church, kids playing with pigeons, cotton candy vendors, go for a horse ride around the square, listen to a local folk troupe, sit out for a coffee, and just enjoy the bustle. Krakow is just an absolutely delightful place to simply spend time. Lots of interesting churches in Krakow. St. Mary's Church is one of many right there in the main market square. That yellow market hall traditionally was where the cloth was sold, so it's still called the Cloth Hall. Now it's actually a gauntlet of souvenir stands, so if you want to do some shopping here. Rick Steves tours, of course, are not really shopping tours, but we can give you a few pointers to make sure you get good quality stuff at a good price if you want to take something home. We also love introducing you to, for your free time and your free time meals, introducing you to some interesting cultural traditions. In Poland, they're called milk bars. Basically, back in the communist period, they had government-subsidized cafeterias. People really couldn't afford to go out to eat at a nice restaurant, but the government wanted to make sure there wasn't a rebellion. So they made sure cheap food was readily available. They called them milk bars, but you can't just get milk there. You can get all sorts of food, delicious traditional Polish food. They're not any longer government regulated and they're regulated, they're not government subsidized, but the prices are still extremely low. You can have a delicious filling meal of traditional Polish food for maybe $5 at one of these. So it's a great way to kind of take advantage of the local culture and the local cuisine. This is a big hearty meal I had at one of these milk bars for just a few dollars. So even when you're free and not having meals with us, we'll make sure you have some good options in mind. If the Czech Republic is about beer, then Poland is obviously about vodka. This is one of the most famous brands, Żubrówka, bison brand vodka. Believe it or not, there actually is a large bison preserve in the wilds of northern Poland, of all places. And the story goes, this particular vodka, each bottle comes with a blade of grass, and they say that the grass comes from these bison preserves. So the bison season the grass, and then the grass seasons the vodka. And I'm telling you, it's high-proof vodka, so you don't have anything to worry about. And we'll make sure that you get to sample, if you want to, some of these interesting local flavors. As for sightseeing, there's a beautiful castle. This used to be the capital of Poland until the capital moved north to Warsaw. You can go to Wawel Castle, which is the most important real estate really in all of Poland. Traditional castle, most important church, and that sort of thing. Wawel Cathedral, this is where all of the Polish kings and queens are buried. Every country has a national church. I showed you the one in Prague. This is the one in Krakow. And of course, it's a very religious country, very Catholic country. This is Pope John Paul II, who actually was, of course, Archbishop here in Krakow, rather, before he was called to Rome to become a cardinal and eventually Pope. Another important part of the story here in Poland is the Jewish story of Poland, and we'll make sure to take you to the Jewish quarter, the former Jewish quarter, called Kazimierz, which is only about a 20-minute walk from downtown. Poland in the Middle Ages, it was a time when a lot of Jewish people were being forced out of other countries in Europe and other kingdoms. And Poland had a particularly progressive king who actually invited Jews to settle, which is why there's, throughout its history, Poland had a very, very large Polish population. Krakow was 1/4 Jewish, before World War II. And if you go to the Jewish quarter of Kazimierz, you can walk through different synagogues and cemeteries and learn about this history, of course, with the help of a guide to make sure you can understand it all. Of course, this is also where the famous movie Schindler's List not only took place, but was actually filmed. And now they've turned the factory that Oskar Schindler, I'm sure you know the story, he was a German industrialist who came to Poland to operate a factory for the Nazis and took pity on his Jewish workers and spent a lot of his personal fortune to save their lives. His former factory, which was sat derelict for decades, just recently, the last 2 or 3 years, was turned into a cutting-edge museum. So we'll make sure you get a chance to go here and learn all about Poland's World War II experience. Of course, the most important and most sobering site relating to this period of history is Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, and we'll stop off here actually on our way into Krakow, coming from the Czech Republic. It's got two parts. There's Auschwitz I, which is the main kind of work camp. This was the first part. It was actually a former political prison that was turned into a concentration camp when World War II came around. People were kept here when they were planned to work, so basically the idea was to keep them alive as much as possible and force them to work. Later, and here, by the way, this has been turned into a fantastic, fascinating, extremely powerful museum where you can learn all about the history. We'll go through there with a guide and make sure you understand all of this very important history. You go and see a room full of, floor to ceiling, full of suitcases. And these were the suitcases that when people arrived at Auschwitz, they were told to write their names on the suitcases and they would be able to claim them later. And then, of course, those people were immediately executed. And then someone would sort through and take what they wanted. And you can still see the suitcases where people have written their names. As Hitler's efforts ramped up and he came up with his so-called final solution, which was the extermination of the Jewish people, they built a second part of the camp called Birkenau. This is about 1.5 miles away, so we'll take you there too as well. And this was basically a factory of death. This was designed to just keep people long enough in order to be able to execute them as efficiently as possible. It could hold more than 100,000 people at a time. And it's extremely sobering to go to this place and see these endless fields where there used to be, there's a few reconstructed ones now, a few of these kind of former stables that were repurposed as barracks. Very, very powerful part of this tour for a lot of people. We're going to head now into Hungary, and I have a Hungarian with me right here. Oh, wait, first I'm going to talk about Eger, then we'll get to George's hometown. The first stop we make in Hungary is a really delightful small town called Eger. It's just one night, but we want to give you a taste of small-town Hungary before we head into the big city. It's got some beautiful architecture, thanks to a very influential bishop 150 years ago. It's also the center of Hungary's most important wine-growing region. So we'll take you to a winery, introduce you to the family that makes the wine, and of course do a tasting. If it's the right time of year, you might even be able to go out and see some of the vineyards. And this is the day that we try to do that school visit that I mentioned earlier. Then we head into the big city of Budapest, and now's a good time for George to tell us a little bit about his hometown and a little bit about himself. George lives in Budapest. He leads our Eastern Europe tours that I'm telling you about now. He also leads our Prague and Budapest tours. So go ahead, George.
Sziasztok, welcome. This is how we greet people in Hungary. And I must say, this is a little bit bigger bus than I'm usually leading. I only have about 25 people, so it's a bit of a challenge for me to speak in front of this many, but I love the tour, and basically I've been leading this tour for 3 years, and I used to be the local guide, leading people, showing people around within Budapest for about 6 years for the tour members of Rick Steve, and I love you guys all because you always bring such a great power and such a huge interest into our country, which we really appreciate. And I always like to start my long tour and short tour as well, saying that I truly hope that you pick this tour because of Budapest. Very good, thank you. And Budapest has got a lot to offer, and if I had to describe the tour with just a very few words, I always describe it in a sense that I compare it to a letter V. We start in Prague, which is the bottom of the V, and as the tour goes on, it's opening up, and you're going into bigger and bigger cities, and once you arrive to Budapest, your jaws will drop, because this is definitely something that, if you don't have any background information about my city, you'll be very surprised to see how grand it is, how beautiful it is, how much it's got to offer. And I love to see tour members' faces, destination by destination, when they come back in the evening or when we gather anywhere, or when I see you guys in town saying, oh, this is my best place, I love Krakow. And then we get to Budapest and they say, I loved Krakow, but I love Budapest now. So yes, it is very, very great. And once we leave Budapest, obviously we go into nature, and it's wow moment after a wow moment. They're all different. It's very meaningful, a lot of messages. And I always like to make sure that at the end of the tour, I'll put everything into sort of one picture, and I let you guys go home with a clear soul and a great understanding of the tour and what Eastern Europe and how we actually coped during the time of communism. So this is my mission during the tour. So I hope I'll see you there on one of the tours. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I'm sold. Let's go right now. This is great. Yeah, and you know, he's right. I'm sorry. You think it's national pride. Your jaw will drop when you get to Budapest. This is a really wonderful city. It's a huge city. It's a lot to take in. It's actually two former cities, Buda and Pest, which eventually merged together. You've got the hilly Buda side on one side of the river and the flat urban Pest side on the other side. By the way, Hungarians say Budapest. It has to do with the way their language works. An S alone is a sh sound. So locals say Budapest. If you want to say Budapest, that's fine too. We'll kind of take whatever we can get. We're going to spend time in both parts of the town. We're going to go over to the castle, head up to the Buda side of the river, and take a quick tour. Just again, like in Prague, we want to show you the highlights. Don't want to overwhelm you, but there's some beautiful stuff there, like the St. Matthias Church, which is sort of one of the main churches of Hungary. Hungary actually has multiple ones. And then just out front, for example, you've got this beautiful decorative terrace that evokes the interesting history of the Hungarians, or the Magyars, as they say in their own language. It's very complicated. I don't have time to get into it right now, but your tour guide will certainly help explain the differences and the nuances of the history in each place. Then you head across the river into the Pest side. This is the flat urban side. It's got more restaurants. It's a little bit more lively. It's got most of the big sites. The famous chain bridge connects the two sides of the river. And also, we want to make sure you get a great view of the city, so we're going to take you on a nighttime Danube cruise, so you can get a beautiful floodlit view of the city at its best. Wonderful landmarks in Budapest, and with some time, we'll do some of these on the tour, and then you have some free time if you want to see some of the others on your own. The fantastic Hungarian Parliament building, The Great Market Hall is a wonderful place to go shopping for souvenirs, but also for produce. This is a really interesting combination of both a touristy market and a real local market. One of the main food items you'd buy here, of course, is paprikash. Hungarian food, compared to this entire region, is very spicy food, so they use a lot of paprika, and it's just got a lot of flavor to it. The city has done an amazing job the last few years, so we're just talking with George about this, of renovating and fixing up its squares, pedestrianizing streets. When I first went there, it was kind of a big hulking metropolis, and now it's becoming more and more user-friendly, more and more modern feeling. But these great old landmarks are still there. Fantastic opera house, one of the best places in Europe to see an opera at bargain prices compared to Vienna, which is just up the river. Interesting history here as well. There's something called the House of Terror. This is a building that coincidentally was used by two different terror regimes in the 20th century. It was first used by the Nazis when they were occupying Budapest, and later it was used by the communist secret police. There's a fascinating exhibit in this House of Terror that tells you about both sides of the so-called dual occupation. Great history here in Budapest. You can learn all about the history of Hungary out at the Millennium Monument, which is the gateway to City Park, one of the most delightful places in Budapest, just to relax, get away from it all, relax like the Hungarians do, go for a stroll, lick an ice cream cone, play a game of chess, or take a soak in the fantastic thermal baths. Now, I'm here to tell you, one of my favorite activities in Hungary is to go to these wonderful thermal baths. I know it sounds intimidating. You think, gosh, what's this like, a Hungarian thermal bath? Your mind just goes wild. But I'm here to tell you, it's basically like your hometown swimming pool, except you're surrounded by gorgeous Baroque domes. The water is 100 degrees, and all around you are pot-bellied, Speedo-clad Hungarians. For years, as a tour guide, I kept trying to tell my tour members, you got to do this on your free time. It's the thing to do in Hungary. But for some reason, they were intimidated. It might have been all those Speedos. So I started taking them. I said, all right, if you're not going to go by yourself, I'll take you. So I'm not sure if all guides do this, but I like to actually organize an optional excursion if you want to go and soak away your stress and play chess and sit under a thundering shower in 100-degree water. I'll be happy to take you and get you checked in and make sure you can find your way around and get settled in and have a great experience here. This is really a quintessential Hungarian experience. I never go to Hungary without going to the thermal baths. These cities, by the way, Eastern Europe has changed dramatically over the last few decades. This might be your image of Eastern Europe, buildings that are caked with soot, gloomy, grimy, gross. I took this picture maybe 10 years ago. A few years later, I came back, and the same building looked like this. It's like they're flipping the Technicolor switch, and this is happening all over Eastern Europe. It's becoming a truly gorgeous place. The place it's always been, but even better. I'll just quickly mention, we've talked a lot already today. I've really focused on Prague and Budapest, partly because we have two tours that cover those. They're both on the Eastern Europe tour. There's also a tour just with those two cities. George does that tour as well. So if you want 8 days split between Prague and Budapest, the two greatest cities of Eastern Europe, this tour is a great option for you. We're going to finish up the Eastern Europe tour with a quick spin. We wanted to just give people a taste of the former Yugoslavia. That means Croatia and Slovenia. So we've picked our favorite stops down there. First is this gorgeous national park in Croatia called Plitvice Lakes National Park. One of the most breathtaking things you'll ever see, I guarantee you. It's a beautiful Grand Canyon filled with terraced lakes, about 16 different lakes. The lakes are all connected by gorgeous waterfalls and ingeniously linked together by a system of boardwalks that literally gets you close enough to the nature that you can literally feel the spray. It's just an absolutely intoxicating place to get in touch with Croatian nature. We like it so much, and all the way along you have views like this. We like this so much, it's the only overnight stop that's on both the Eastern Europe tour and the Adriatic tour, because no one would ever complain about going here twice. Oh, did I mention the water is spectacularly clear? And these are the kinds of natural wonders that would be challenging. You can do this on your own, but it's complicated. The bus schedule is kind of a headache, or you have to have a car. This is the kind of experience that a tour makes accessible. We really pride ourselves on that. It's time for some fun in the sun, so we're going to head over to the Croatian coastline, take an island across to a boat across to the island of Rab. You'll have actually 2 nights here and a full day, and this is your vacation from your vacation day. It's a good chance to make some new friends at the beach. Just enjoy the beautiful waters. You can even hire a local captain to take you out for a little boat trip and see a little bit more of the island. Just a great place to relax and unwind. We're near the end of the tour, so you're ready for a break probably at this point after all these big cities. Our final stop is the beautiful, small, tiny country of Slovenia, only about 2 million people, about the size, half the size of New Jersey, but it's got a ton of beauty and great attractions crammed into that small space. We'll take you to one of the best caves in this country that's very famous for its caves. This one's called Škocjan Cave. Take you on a really interesting hike through the fantastic formations there. And then we finish the Eastern Europe tour at Lake Bled. This is Slovenia's leading mountain resort, and this is a very beautiful mountainous country. This is sort of the best place to get an accessible dose of that mountain beauty. It's a lake that's about 3.5 miles around, so you can walk around the lake in, 2 hours or so. The middle of the lake has a beautiful, tranquil little island capped with a church. We'll load you onto a boat, and your oarsman will row you rhythmically out to that island in these traditional Plitna boats, which are made only here on this particular lake. You end up at the bottom of this staircase, 99 stairs, which you climb up to the church on top. And if you get winded near the top of these 99 stairs, think about the local wedding tradition. Every Saturday in the summer, a steady stream of brides and grooms come out on these Plitna boats to the island, and the groom is supposed to carry, or try to carry, his bride up all 99 stairs, thereby proving himself fit for marriage. If you'd rather not carry your spouse, that's optional. And then if you want to relax in the afternoon with your free time, you can walk all the way around the lake, snap pictures of the ever-changing views, and just think about what a wonderful itinerary this Eastern Europe tour is that I've just described. Now, there's another tour before we're finished. We've got about 13 minutes left. Another tour that we built on the success of our Eastern Europe tour with, I think it was about 7 or 8 years ago. Tina and me and Marian Krišković, another one of our Eastern Europe guides, we were at this meeting and we started talking and we said, our tour members on Eastern Europe, they love that tour, they love Croatia and Slovenia, but you can just see they're craving more time in the former Yugoslavia, in Croatia and Slovenia. So we put our heads together and came up with a 2-week itinerary to show you the best of, again, it's complicated, the Western Balkans, the former Yugoslavia, Croatia, Slovenia, and Bosnia. We call it the best of the Adriatic, after the sea that you're never more than a short drive from throughout the entire tour. We've got 3 days in Slovenia at the beginning, the capital of Ljubljana, and Lake Bled, through Lake Bled to the mountains. Then we've got 2 days in Istria in the north. We return to that Plitvice Lakes National Park with the waterfalls. And the last week or so is focused on the Dalmatian coast, which is the most famous kind of picture-perfect Croatian coastal escape. 2 nights in the big city of Split, 2 nights on the island of Korčula, 2 nights in the great city of Dubrovnik, and a little detour into Bosnia in the town of Mostar. So I'll very quickly go through this, and we'll hear from Tina, too, to get her take on it. But let me just quickly narrate the itinerary. Before I do that, by the way, obviously it's beyond the scope of this talk, but the recent history in this part of the world is even more important and more complicated than anywhere else in Eastern Europe. Of course, this is a place where the last time you heard the names of these countries, it very well might have been on the nightly news hearing about war and ethnic cleansing and this sort of thing. It's incredibly important to us, both on the Eastern Europe tour and the Adriatic tour, to help you understand that. So your guide will spend a lot of time really helping you wrap your head around who are the Serbs, who are the Croats, who are the Bosniaks, why are there Muslims in the middle of Europe? I wish I could explain it to you now, but they will certainly explain it to you very well on your tour. You'll learn about Marshal Tito. He was the communist-era strongman dictator of Yugoslavia, who initially was hated in some circles, but eventually became very popular because his steady leadership kept the country together. You'll learn about Slobodan Milosevic and Franjo Tudjman and Radovan Karadzic, all of these guys that you've been hearing about for the last 25 years in the news. Some of them are still standing trial today. Will help you kind of understand what their role was in all of these wars and explain how 7 countries now have emerged from what was one country, Yugoslavia. For me, it's a real highlight of the tour, helping people understand this really complex area of the world that they've always kind of wondered about, but never quite understood. All right, we're going to start off up in Slovenia. Remember, that's where the Eastern Europe tour finished. So it's this beautiful, tiny, mountainous country up in the north. On the Eastern Europe tour, we don't really get a good look at the capital. So for the Adriatic tour, to complement the Eastern Europe tour, if you want to do both, we spend more time in the capital city, Ljubljana. For me, it's my favorite small city in Europe and one of the more accessible cities, certainly one of the more accessible capital cities that you're ever going to see. It's just a very delightful, mellow, low-key city of about 200,000 people. It's the kind of city where everyone seems to be out on a Sunday stroll any day of the week. It's absolutely delightful. Wonderful riverfront promenades with some fantastic cafes. My favorite activity in Ljubljana, it's not all of the great museums, which it does have. It's sitting out and savoring a coffee and just watching the world go by along the river. It's a great place, low-impact place to start your tour. Great architecture in Ljubljana. The city was damaged in an earthquake around the turn of the 20th century, so you've got a lot of great early 20th century architecture that was designed around that time, including some pretty unusual stuff. The big name in Slovenia and Ljubljana in particular is Jože Plečnik. This was the architect who, in the early 20th century, kind of remade this whole city in his own image. He lived in the city, he walked to work every day, so he really had a sense of what made a city work. It was kind of like feng shui on a grand urban scale. He designed bridges and embankments and streets and roads and houses and buildings and offices, and he's a very important figure, Jože Plečnik. So you'll learn a lot about him in Ljubljana. This is one of his famous bridges. This is one of his masterworks. It's just loaded with symbolism. It's the National University Library. So the theme is overcoming barriers to attain enlightenment and knowledge. For example, here's Moses in the middle, who led his people through hardships for 40 years to the promised land. When you walk in the door, you take hold of the doorknob, and it's shaped like Pegasus, the winged horse. So as you enter the library, he's going to whisk you up to new levels of enlightenment. You climb a very dark staircase that feels like an Egyptian tomb, and then at the top, there's this bright, open reading room. Really wonderful symbolism behind a lot of his work that we'll make sure you understand. Ljubljana, by the way, it's just very charming and very scenically situated. It's often compared to Salzburg because you've got a castle on a mountain with a river down below and the mountains in the horizon. Next, we go to Lake Bled just for a quick visit on our way to the mountains. And since Tina's from there, I wanted to give you a chance to get to hear from her about what it's like from Lake Bled. Tina leads our Eastern Europe tours, but also our Adriatic tours. Go ahead, Tina.
Thank you, Cameron. Dobar dan. Yes, I truly live there. And yes, it's even prettier than on the pictures. And some of you maybe have been there, but you should come because there's not many people that know where Slovenia is. And whenever I travel, they always ask me, what? What is Slovenia? And I always say, well, when you come, you will know what it is because it's a beautiful, beautiful country. And many people, if you will ask them, if you will say, I'm going to Slovenia, they will always say, why do you want to go there? I'll give you a few hints. First of all, we have a lot of beautiful nature. We live in a country that Cameron mentions is the size of New Jersey, but we have it all. We have mountains, we have seaside, only 26 miles of it. Not much, but still, we have it, more than Austrians. And some other countries in Europe. And we do have amazing caves. We have great cities, small ones. We're only 2 million people. If you drop us off in Canada, nobody would even notice. And I think we have also delicious food. And one thing that we really rave about is our brandy. So if you come to Slovenia, be sure you get treated by a brandy, at least one. We have many, many, many of them. But at least one, and this is a sign of hospitality. And whenever you drink brandy, I'll give you a hint to be local. You do it in one quick one. Yes, it hurts only once. So I hope I see you in Slovenia next year or in the coming years. And till then, I'll just say na svidenje and see you soon.
Thank you very much. Tina Heedy, thank you very much. We're very lucky. We have guides from two of my favorite places, Budapest and Slovenia. Really wonderful, undiscovered, underrated destinations that you'll see on these tours. I've got about 6 minutes. I'm going to quickly finish out the rest of this itinerary, just to give you a sense of what else is on the Adriatic tour. From Lake Bled, we head up into the mountains. We drive up what's called the Vršič Pass. It's 50 switchbacks. 24 on the way up, 26 on the way down, and I tell you, our bus drivers could do it blindfolded. They all live within 100 feet of the bottom of the pass. Really dramatic, really beautiful trip. Interesting history all along the way, churches, mountain overviews. On the other side, we come down the Socha River Valley, which is a both very beautiful place, but also very historic. The name for this in Italian is Isonzo. This was the place where there was fighting on the Isonzo front in World War I, not World War II, which was immortalized by Ernest Hemingway. A Farewell to Arms, he wrote about his experiences driving an ambulance in this part of what's now Slovenia. Beautiful, it's interesting combination again, beautiful mountain scenery, fascinating, and then you go out on a rope bridge and go for a little bounce. Also fascinating history. You have these gravestones and these memorials to this fighting in World War I, not World War II, World War I. So your guide will make sure you have equal doses of fun and history on that part of the trip. Now we're going to head into Croatia for the rest of the tour, starting in Istria, which is this northern kind of wedge-shaped peninsula. The most beautiful town, and for me and Rick, we agree, the best town between Dubrovnik and Venice on the Adriatic is this town called Rovinj. This is just an absolutely beautiful town. Looks like it's being pulled up to Italy, pulled up to heaven by its grand bell tower. That was a little bit of a Freudian slip. I was just thinking it's one of the most Italian-feeling towns in Croatia. So it's at a region that kind of straddles the two cultures. Great place to go on a photo safari. You might stumble upon a fisherman mending his nets out in the streets, beautiful little makeshift art galleries, and people who are drying their laundry as if they're flying a flag. Just a really tranquil place. You never know who's watching you when you're on your photo safari in Rovinj. Rovinj's a beautiful place, but not too far away are some other interesting sites in Istria. We're going to spend a day on the bus here kind of side-tripping to a bunch of cool stuff. One is the big city of Pula. This is where one of the best preserved Roman amphitheaters anywhere in Europe is. We'll take you on a little tour so you can get a sense of this. It's interesting. People think there's a beautiful amphitheater like that in Croatia. You would think maybe in Italy or maybe in Provence they have some. But yes, this is one of the best preserved and biggest right here in northern Croatia. And the whole city of Pula is littered with Roman ruins. You've got a Roman triumphal arch and a Roman temple right there on the main square. Really fun to see these cities you never would have thought you've gone to, and here are some great sights. Our favorite thing about Istria, though, are these wonderful hill towns that dot the countryside. And instead of staying on the coast, because we stay on the coast on other parts of this tour, when we're in Istria, our home base is this hill town called Motovun. It gets the Rick Steves seal of approval. He likes it. He really likes it. It's got a very tranquil main square, beautiful views overlooking the countryside, and this is a good chance for us to sample some local wines. By the way, speaking of wines, Croatia has some really good wines. It's an industry that was collectivized by the communists, but it's getting better and better. So as we travel through Croatia, you'll get to taste some local wines. Motovun, Istria in particular, has some great truffles. So if you like truffles, that's a great chance to get them. In general, Croatian food is what you might think of as Italian food, a lot of pizza and pasta, but you also have a lot of seafood as well. So there's a fair amount of variety on this tour. Of course, every meal ends with some ice cream. We're going to make a return trip to Plitvice. Whether or not you've seen it on Eastern Europe, no one will complain about going to Istria. Also, we're going to see some of the buildings that were damaged during the recent war that I alluded to earlier, and we'll help you understand how that war fits into Croatian history. These towns, by the way, are all completely back to normal. They're repairing the damage. They're very, very safe and accessible. It might seem intimidating to go to a town like this on a tour, but it's an important part of our tour to explain the history and to help you understand that it's really very safe. We're heading now to the coastline, where we're going to first go to the big city of Split, which is sort of the capital of that Dalmatian coast that I mentioned too. This is a really big city, which is nice because a lot of the coastal places we go are more small town. And this is a good chance to sit out on this beautiful main promenade called the Riva, sip a coffee, do some people watching. Enjoy the main square of Split, which is actually the former entrance hall of a Roman emperor's palace. The Roman Emperor Diocletian actually was from this part of Croatia. He retired back here to Split. He built a gigantic palace here by the sea. This is him, Diocletian. After the fall of Rome, his palace fell into ruins, and it was kind of cannibalized and became the street plan for the old town of Split. So you've got modern people from Croatia living on ancient Roman ruins. For example, this is Diocletian's mausoleum. He actually used to torture Christians. He was the last non-Christian Roman emperor. He actually used to torture Christians, some say even in this very building. Now it's become the cathedral. So there's actually Italian-style bell tower up above. We'll get a chance to get a look at some of those ruins. I'm going to skip through some of this because we're getting short on time, but there's some more local artists here that you'd like to meet. Take a boat cruise out to the islands. We're going to take a quick stop on the island of Hvar. This is sort of our chance to get away and have that vacation from your vacation. We're going to have a few hours passing through on the island of Hvar, just enough time to get a taste of this cute little town. And then from there, we're going to hop another boat. You can climb up to the fortress and look over the harbor. Take another boat over to the island of Korčula. This is where we're going to spend 2 nights. It's the kind of place that makes you want to jump for joy. We're going to have 2 nights here. It's a great chance to explore this beautiful island town. Maybe do a little sightseeing. There's some interesting little churches where you can poke in there. Crystal clear water, a great place to have a beach day. Go for a swim with this beautiful fortified old town just over your shoulder. Korčula is really a great place to take a break and catch your breath. because we're moving on to a more demanding part of the tour. This is where we head into Bosnia. We're crossing the border, and really in just a 3-hour drive, you go from the beaches of Croatia to what feels like something that could be in Turkey. And it feels that way because it was for a long time. For about 400 or 500 years of its history, this part of Bosnia was under Turkish rule. The Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent built this beautiful bridge called the Old Bridge. It's literally built by a Turkish sultan. If you know your history, one of the symbols of that war in Yugoslavia in the early 1990s was this bridge, which was destroyed and bombarded with shells from the hilltop above and fell into the river. It's a very powerful story to hear about how this 500-year-old bridge was destroyed and now has been rebuilt. So we'll make sure you understand all of the history behind that. Also, it's great to just get this little taste of Turkey in the middle of what we think of as Central Europe. You've got a Turkish-style bazaar where you could do some shopping. Our local guide will take us into a mosque and talk about how Islam and being a Muslim person works in this part of Europe. It's the same faith that you have in the Middle East and North Africa, but the way it's practiced here is somewhat different. And we'll even go into an old Turkish house so we can see how when the Turkish people ruled here, pashas and sultans, how they might have lived when they came to Mostar. This is also a town that was badly damaged in the recent war. It's another opportunity to fill out our understanding and learn some more stories about that war. I love the fact that our tour spends the night here. This is becoming a very popular day trip destination from places like Dubrovnik, but our tour does spend the night here, and it gives you a chance to stroll those cobbles and listen to the call to prayer warbling over the rooftops from a floodlit minaret. I'll just wrap up here with our grand finale, Dubrovnik. This is the last stop on our tour, and for a lot of folks, it's a real highlight. It's called the Pearl of the Adriatic, this town, because of the way that this fortified wall sticks out into the sea. Beautiful rooftops, fortified city. You can walk through the gate and down the main drag. There's a lot of sightseeing here, but none of it is really that fascinating. It's just a great place to enjoy the atmosphere and the ambiance. Maybe you go into a church, go to a secluded cloister, head out to the port and maybe take a boat out to the offshore island to find some peace and go to the beach. They've just rebuilt a cable car that was destroyed during the war, so from the old town of Dubrovnik, you can ride effortlessly up a cable car, and you have a wonderful view overlooking not just Dubrovnik. From here, you can literally see 3 countries. You can see Croatia, Montenegro, and Bosnia, all from this one spot, giving you a sense of the historic importance of Dubrovnik. Dubrovnik is yet another great place for a beach outing, so if you want to go for a swim, they even have some ladders going into the water just off of that old town wall. Our favorite activity in this city of Dubrovnik, which we'll do together, is walking around the old town wall that encircles the whole old town. It takes about an hour and a half or 2 hours. We'll get an early start to beat the crowds, just like we do in Prague. This is a fantastic, magnificent walk. You've got a sea of rooftops on one side and the actual sea on the other side. And we'll take our time and learn all about the history and the fortifications and why the city looks the way it does. By the way, you'll notice that there's some brand new, bright and shiny roof tiles and some beat up old ones here. If you know your history, this was one of the few coastal destinations that was damaged during the recent war. It's amazing how quickly they've repaired and restored it. You would never know if no one told you that this city was under siege for several months. The same streets now are obviously back open and ready for business, but it's another important part of the history that we're going to make sure to teach you about. And as you walk along the walls, you'll be able to pick out the old and new roof tiles. The new roof tiles, of course, represent the 85% of homes that were damaged or destroyed during the war that have had to be replaced. And for our grand finale, looking down from that wall, you look and see, clinging like a barnacle to the outside of the city wall, this rocky bar with these umbrellas. This is called Cold Drinks Buja. It's one of my favorite bars anywhere in Europe. Buja means hole in the wall, and that's literally what you have to climb through to get here. You can sit out, nurse a drink, look out to sea, nothing between you and the Adriatic but a railing and a cocktail, and think about, watch cruise ships sail off into the horizon, and think about what a gorgeous part of the world Eastern Europe is. Folks, thank you very, very much for your attention. We've got another class starting in 10 minutes, so please quickly make your way to the exit, and we'll see you later.
And that was Cameron Hewitt taking us on our Best of Europe tour, our Adriatic tour, and our Prague and Budapest tours. Up next at 11:45 a.m. Pacific Standard Time is Rick Steves, and he'll take us through England and Scotland. But first, let's take a couple minutes to talk with some of our Eastern Europe guides. Tina Hiti, thank you for being on Test Drive, a tour guide. Where are you from, and which tours do you lead for Rick Steves?
I come from Slovenia, and Slovenia is a very tiny little country. And I lead Eastern Europe tours, and I lead Adriatic tours.
Great, great. Now, I've heard that you have a real appreciation for understanding what literally grows along the tour route, meaning food and herbs and flowers, and how those connect with traditional lifestyles. Can you share some examples?
So Slovenes, we are very, very traditional. We always go back to the roots. And usually a lot of the things we've learned, it's actually from our grandparents. Right now there is a trend in our country that goes back to nature. So we are all eager herb and flower picking people. So you can always find us somewhere in the forest, somewhere on the pastures. And we just like to dip things in different things and make something out of it. And usually that would be a medicine that would use instead of traditional pills. So what we do on some of my tours is actually we go into the pastures and we pick up some mountain herbs, and I explain the tour members what the herbs do, what they can do to them, for what they can use them. And for example, a very nice medicine, when you put the pine needles into sugar and let it soak for about 3 weeks, you get a beautiful cough medicine. And if you add a little schnapps to it, you get a kick to that medicine, and it really helps.
How fun. Now, not many tour groups go to Bosnia-Herzegovina, but ours do. Is there a specific experience or meal that really stands out for the tour members?
I would say generally the tour of the Adriatic is a little scary for some people because all they've heard about Croatia and Bosnia especially is the war. So they have a little fear for that, and I'm so glad that when they come, they see it's not the war. It's beautiful places, beautiful nature, beautiful scenery, and beautiful people that we meet, and delicious food. My God, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we come to a place and a family sets up a meal for us, which is stuffed pears, apples, baklavas, different rolls with cottage cheese, and with just delicious, yummy stuff, and it's all over the place. We hardly manage to finish it all, and they even want to pack it up that we bring it along the way. And it's just the hospitality of these people, the friendliness, the open-heartedness of them that just eliminates the fear that with what they brought up to the tour that they took.
And that's what travel's all about, right?
Yeah,
Huh,
yeah.
Exciting. Well, George Farkas, thank you for joining us on Test Drive a Tour Guide.
Thank you for having me.
And where are you from, and which tours do you lead?
I'm from Budapest, Hungary, and I leave the Prague, Budapest, and the Eastern European tour.
Okay, great. Now, on Eastern Europe tours, our groups get to experience the bustle of Budapest, but you also visit smaller towns. Can you give us examples of what it feels like to be in those quieter places?
It is very exciting to actually go down to those quieter places. And basically, if you ask a foreigner who actually spent maybe a year living in Hungary, they will explain Hungary as being two countries. There are actually two countries within Hungary. One would be Budapest, a country on its own, and then there would be the countryside. Once you go down to the countryside, you're actually experiencing, I would say, the positive side of going back in years. So basically you travel maybe 10 or 15 or maybe half an hour away, because we need to acknowledge that distances in Europe and in Hungary actually have a complete different meaning. So traveling 15-20 minutes basically means that you go down to the countryside, and then you arrive to a place which is actually back in phrase. It will give you a feeling as if you went back in 10-15 years. People are a lot slower, and they are very welcoming. What you will notice, and maybe could be uncomfortable for a very little, a few minutes, that people will look at you in your eyes, and they will nod, they will say hi, and even for me, coming from Budapest, it's a bit strange, and then I need to grow to learn that yes, they're just saying hi because they're friendly, as well as Tina was talking about food. You go down, and one of the great signs in Hungary to show hospitality is stuff people as much as they can. So they give you as much food as possible, as many drinks, start with a palinka, and it is actually a true great experience to go down to one of these countryside, and then as well as learn about the smaller cities and their main church and the church-going people and so forth. So yes, it is very interesting.
Now, George, I've heard that Hungarian wines are quite popular in Europe, and we don't really experience them much in the United States. What makes them so special, and do tour members get the opportunity to learn about Hungarian winemaking?
Definitely they do. And first of all, let me say that I'm very sad that you don't get a chance to taste our wine. You need to go online and buy some. I'm sure there is some available. We can say that basically to be in Hungary, it's impossible to be in Hungary. It's impossible not to be in a wine region. This is what I meant to say, because each part of the country actually produces wine. And what's wonderful to see nowadays is actually after passing the communist times, when everything was brought under the commune and making wine was a factory, basically all that has gone away and people became very serious about wine. They're becoming extremely passionate about wine, and they spending so much time and so much energy to actually bring wine out the way they meant to have that bottle, they meant to have that wine. And they say you can only call a bottle of wine to be something, let's say a Cabernet or a Sauvignon Blanc or anything, if you at least give it a few years to grow and bring out the flavors, and then you name that wine. So they're very, very passionate about wine nowadays in Hungary and
well, it
and
certainly sounds like food and wine will be a highlight to any trip to Eastern Europe, and
that's for sure.
how exciting to have guides like you to take you to the best places. Now, a question for both of you: can we just have a little discussion about the variety of places people go on the tours, and maybe a couple moments that you find really special?
I think on the Adriatic and also on Eastern Europe tour, the magic moment for many is just going to the Plitvice National Park. And it's a spectacular world where you go by 16 lakes interconnected with hundreds and hundreds of waterfalls. It's the color, the water, and it's just, it's breathtaking. I've done it so many times and it's still beautiful, and it's usually a wow moment for many, many tour members.
Wow. And George, what would you choose as a magic moment?
For my tour members, obviously, has to be Budapest. And one of the most beautiful moments, once at the end of the first day in Budapest, we gather and we go down to the river, and the sun is setting. We get on a cruise ship and we ride along the meant to be blue Danube, which is actually talking to you, and all the buildings come alive and the lights are on. You're underneath the chain bridge. You look to the left, you see the castle district. You look to the right, you see the beautifully illuminated Parliament. And if you don't call that a wow moment, I'll have a difficult job.
Well, and so are there times when people are surprised that they found something as beautiful as they did?
Oh yeah, they're surprised every time they come to my country, because they hadn't had a clue about how Slovenia looks like, and they are like, oh wow, you actually live here? Yes, they are
lucky.
surprised many times, I think.
And I can say the same. I think we're quite lucky with Tina, because many of the visitors that come, they don't really have much of an expectation about our countries. So we can always pleasantly surprise them. Once they arrive to Budapest, one of the main surprises they come up with is that they don't expect the city to be that grand. So the Champs-Élysées type of road, the grand buildings, the brick avenues, the size of the city, yet the amount of things that it's got to offer really surprises them. And by the end of the time, they say they wish they could come back and spend at least a week.
I'll take a week.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Tina. Thank you, George, for
Thank
being
you.
with us. And coming up next is our very own Rick Steves taking us to Scotland and England. Thanks for being with us.